All right, so this is pretty interesting. So, Bill Maher actually went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he went on this pretty lengthy sort of spiel about why Amy Klobuchar is the right candidate for the Democrats. He takes a pretty massively moderate turn. He starts to sound even conservative in some areas, and it's very clear that he has completely lost his mind. And I think it's a combination of, you know, he's very wealthy. He's worth like over $100 million. He makes like $10 million a year. I guess that makes him one of the few people who would be affected by an AOC marginal tax rate. You know what I'm saying? So even though it wouldn't hit him at 10 million even, but he would be one of the few people who's close. I think it's that mixed with just I don't give a fuck because I'm wealthy and it doesn't really matter. Change isn't really all that necessary for me, and just kind of laziness. I feel like, but he's gonna go on this long diatribe, so I'm gonna let you guys hear it out, and then we're gonna come back and talk about it.
The suburbs, last time in 2016, there was a lot of people in the suburbs who don't follow politics that closely, and they just said, boy, things suck in America. Let's let the dog drive for a while. Let's see what happens. Let's let the dog drive. Let's see what happens. And they didn't, they want to, he's a businessman. He must know how to run the economy and all this stuff. We'll try something new. Those people, I think, first of all, a lot of them have peeled away already. Those are the gettable voters. Those are the people, if the Democrats want to win, I think that they have to target. And they already have. But that's why it's so risky to run someone far left. I think if you run Amy Klobuchar, as much as people say, oh, she's, dull and she's this and she's that and no one's excited. Yeah, but again, binary. At the end of the day, when there's only two choices, Trump or her, I think it would be very hard for her to get the nomination. I think as far as like winning the election, I think she would do it fairly easily.
Do you think that Bernie's too left? Do you think he's too left for a lot of people?
Yes.
Do you think that's real?
But the media asks the wrong question.
Yeah.
The media asks, and there's a debate tonight, the media asks the wrong question, which is, what would you do? This is a question that only makes sense if you're running for king. The question should not be, what would you do? The question is, what can you get through? What can you propose that Mitch McConnell will not either block or you can override with votes? Because that's a very different discussion. What Bernie Sanders wants to do, we shouldn't even be talking about because it's not going to happen.
The free education,
yes,
paying back student loan debt.
Medicare for all. All these, unless the Republicans self-deport, even if the Democrat wins the election, there's still going to be half the country that's Republican and half the Congress is going to be Republican. And a lot of Democrats are not for this stuff. When the Democrats took over the House in 2018, it was moderate Democrats who won their elections. It wasn't the far left. So
you get 4 years of spinning your wheel in the mud.
You get,
hoping to get some traction, even if he gets in.
Again, it's what can get through Congress. What can you get a consensus on? What can you make possible? Obama, when he did health care, said, yes, if we were starting from scratch, it would make sense to go for a single-payer system. But we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from a system where most people already have health insurance through their employer. It's a crazy story how that happened. It was World War II, and they couldn't raise wages because that was the law, so they had to find a way to give employers something else, so they gave them health insurance. But that's what we have now. And a lot of people like it or say they like it. I don't think a lot of people like arguing with their insurance company, but they're afraid of something worse. And I don't blame them. If you're going to tell me the government, and I'm a Democrat, but if you're going to tell me the government is going to smoothly handle taking over something that large, I am going to be a little skeptical.
Well, it should be. They don't smoothly handle anything. There's no evidence they smoothly handle anything other than maybe delivering the news or delivering the mail.
Look, again, as an old school progressive, when you go down the list of things that the progressives have accomplished, especially in my lifetime, I cheer them all. Social Security, well, that wasn't my lifetime, but they improved it in my lifetime. Medicare, Medicaid. These are great programs. I mean, before Social Security, the senior poverty rate was like in the 28% or something, and then it went down below 10. It was a success. But when you look at what the government really, what their big successes have amounted to, it's passing out money that very often they don't have. That's what they're really good at. Running a giant healthcare system, especially when the politicians who are proposing these systems will not, A, talk enough about, we got to cap the gouging. You can't pass out all this money if you're going to allow people, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies to charge anything they want, when the price of an EpiPen can go up from $12 to $1,200 overnight. That just can't happen. And also, they don't ask the people to lift a finger to take care of their own health. Nobody's healthcare system is going to work.
So yeah, I think it's official. Bill Maher has completely lost it. You know, he had endorsed Bernie Sanders beforehand, but it looks like he's not on that train anymore. Looks like he's more on the Amy Klobuchar train, which is absolutely hilarious. Considering how bombastic of a character Bill Maher is, you're talking about a guy who had a show called Politically Incorrect, where he purposefully would say shit that would make people mad. It's really weird to see him endorse Amy Klobuchar, who's incredibly boring, a moderate. I've also seen a lot from Bill Maher in the past on Real Time, where he has, basically said, we need our own version of the Tea Party. In fact, I think that there's a clip of him roasting Jon Stewart because he was having this rally to restore sanity, basically to bring everyone together. And he said, no, this is stupid. We need a more left-wing version. We need a left-wing version of the Tea Party. So clearly something weird has shifted in Bill Maher's head. I'm not particularly sure what exactly it is. Maybe Trump derangement syndrome hit him very possibly. But again, worth mentioning that Bill Maher is very wealthy. He has a lot of money. So change to him isn't very dire. None of it's really going to affect him big time. And so he's kind of just chilling, doing his own thing. And now all he's worried about is, as long as you get Trump out of power, then everything's all hunky-dory for me, because obviously he's a very wealthy guy. But just to talk about some of these things, right? So Amy Klobuchar is very boring and immoderate, obviously. But what I find really hilarious about the proposition that America is not ready for a left-wing candidate like Bernie Sanders, or we need to run a centrist because you need someone in the center to win. Hillary Clinton was, by definition, a centrist in 2016, and she lost. So please explain to me how it is that you can explain that the second time is going to work in terms of running another centrist. How on earth is that actually going to work? It doesn't make any sense. You're doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result. How on earth do you think that's going to work out? And so we saw what happened to Hillary Clinton, and we essentially analyze it and look and say, hey, look, the Rust Belt fell for Donald Trump. And that's because Donald Trump was anti those trade policies, or at least in a fake way. And Hillary Clinton had called the TPP the gold standard like 20 times. So they saw through that, okay? And they legitimately thought that Donald Trump was going to give them health care. Coal miners thought so. And so we look at that and we say, hey, that's why Bernie Sanders will be the correct candidate. It's also worth noting that when you go issue by issue, the populace largely agrees on these issues, okay? Raising the minimum wage, free college education, Medicare for all, etc., etc. And I love how he talks about, who's really going to see the government handling healthcare smoothly. How on earth do you see a healthcare system, right? Where you're talking about a shit ton of different private insurance companies all negotiating with companies and hospitals to figure out pricing for stuff. How do you possibly see that going more smoothly? This big, massive clusterfuck, okay, of things that we just have no idea what's going on. How on earth are like 40 trillion different private insurance companies doing all of this going to be more smoothly than a one government actually negotiating on our behalf? So it's not to the point where it's like this massive clusterfuck in which there's this price gouging, etc., etc. What on earth, it's going to be so smooth with the government? Why wouldn't you say that with this massive clusterfuck of a system that we have now? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The way to make it smooth would be to have the government be our negotiator on our behalf, and we would have this one sort of system under this big tent, essentially. That would be the way to make it go smooth. So to me, that was just very odd. And again, that's where it hits me. It's like, okay, this guy's wealthy. He's got the best insurance a man could buy. Is it really pressing him to change our insurance system? Fuck no, dude. He doesn't care. He doesn't need a change in his insurance system. He's fine. Bill Maher's fine. He's chilling, dog. It doesn't matter to him, dude. And so he's like, oh man, you know, it's remarkable. But at times there, he just starts to sound conservative, even more than he does just like a moderate Democrat. At certain points, he starts to sound like a straight up conservative. So I'm kind of like, okay. And this idea that we need a moderate rather than a Bernie Sanders type, okay, and calling him far left is pretty funny as well. Maybe in the context of this country, I guess you could say that, in terms of the way that we view our Overton window. But how on earth is having a moderate in place better than having a left-wing guy who's going to start the negotiation at a further left-wing place? I also found this really hilarious with Hillary Clinton. People were under the assumption that Hillary Clinton, the most hated Democrat, maybe besides Bill Clinton, but I think Hillary's even more hated, she's going to get more done as a Democrat than Bernie Sanders? Get out of here, man. Especially because Bernie Sanders often will have bipartisan appeal. Like, for example, with his amendment to allow drugs to be imported into the United States from other countries because they're so much cheaper everywhere else. That got people, if I remember correctly, John McCain and Ted Cruz and a couple of other Republicans had voted for it. Like, he has the bipartisan, he knows how to get stuff done. But I've always found that hilarious. If you start at the negotiation table from the left, then you compromise somewhere in the middle between that position and the centrist position that Amy Klobuchar or whichever moderate would start. So if you start at the table with the public option and then you end up not getting a public option and you end up with the Romney Care system, well, how is that better than starting out with Medicare for all and then getting a public option or beefing up and like lowering Medicare age requirement and stuff like that? I just find it hilarious. I find that super hilarious. And then the same thing goes for getting stuff done in the Congress. You know, there were a lot of things that were really tough to get through. Those things being Social Security, the Lochner era Supreme Court was shutting everything FDR was passing down as unconstitutional. Every social program that he put in through, they were like, nope, unconstitutional, nope, unacceptable. There are a lot of struggles that have been faced by previous movements for things like women's suffrage, civil rights, Social Security. All these different things had a lot of resistance to them through the system. So what are we just going to do? Just give up and never do anything? That's so dumb. Imagine doing that in those scenarios. Obviously, it's going to be tough, but we are here to push and fight for it. That's what we're here for, obviously. And again, it all comes back to Bill Maher being a wealthy guy. He's not in trouble. He doesn't have to worry. He's relaxing, so to him it doesn't matter. He doesn't really care. But this is very, very bad. This is very, very bad from Bill Maher. Bill Maher has completely gone down the drain at this point because it means that the last straw that was hanging for me with Bill Maher was his endorsement of Bernie Sanders and his support for Bernie Sanders. Now that's gone, so everything that I've liked about Bill Maher is completely gone at this point. He's turned into a boring centrist, which seems to me the antithesis of his entire being. For a long time, and he still is like this today, he's the guy who triggers people. He loves triggering people. He's very edgy with all of his content. But nowadays, it seems like he is somebody who really is in love with the moderate, which is quite embarrassing, man. So embarrassing.